All right.
All right, we're live. Good.
So,
Session number 15.
Wow.
We made it. We made
We
it.
went to number 15.
For
So-
almost 4 months.
Yeah, so we need to get to
Mhm.
Christmas time at least. That's our target now.
exactly.
What's wrong with 1 year? What's wrong with 1 year?
Yeah. You know that historically there were a lot of web blogs that would just die exactly at the passage point of 1 year, because it was so hard for people to maintain a blog that they would make the effort to arrive at the 1 year mark, and then they would announce, okay, this is too much, I can't do it, and that was over. And so because I was also doing web blogging, also had a blog, I really felt that also, and I also almost gave up at 1 year point. So I feel that if we take smaller steps and just say, hey,
Aha.
let's go get across summer, and so it's easier to accept, and there's no pressure for, oh my goodness, 1 year yet. So I think we're learning and enjoying it, so it should be good.
Okay, first summer, then Christmas. I got
Yeah.
you.
Exactly. And
I
then
think
there's,
we get through summer with this will, continuing. That'd be a thing.
yeah. I mean, we know that not so many people will come during summertime, which is very normal. So we need to be resilient during that stage.
Well,
Yeah.
The Americans never take vacation anyway, so we're
Yeah.
at least not as long a vacation as you guys. So
Right. Yeah,
Oh.
we here in Europe, we really like our vacations. Some countries have bigger ones. I think like France might have usually about 6 weeks. So those are my favorites.
just inviting or welcoming everybody on the.
Yeah, so because for the people who are kind of used to being on the web jam,
Yep.
It might be a little bit different this time because it's not a meetup but a webinar. And for those who are familiar with Zoom, it means that you can't see each other. You don't have control over your camera or your sound. So yeah, sorry. So we have a little bit more control over you. So, anyway, you're in the decompression zone. So we're going to start at the top of the hour, and because it's a webinar, we're going to give people a little bit more time to kind of
Right.
come online and that kind of stuff. So,
But after the first hour, we do get into our backstage moment, and then everything will be as usual, and we'll be seeing each other.
we'll make everyone panelists. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make almost everyone panelist. We'll make
The chosen ones.
100 people-ish. Well, up to 100 people we can make panelists.
All right.
We are also using a different tool, a new tool, at least new to us, called Slido. And so, Ezekiel, if you'll put a link to the Slido event in the chat, everybody who's on the webinar, we'd like for you guys to fire this up on your mobile app, or you can open it in a browser. And it's a kind of a sophisticated Q&A and polling tool. And we'll be using that for you to ask questions to Doug during the presentation. And I'll talk about the agenda in just a second, but if you can go ahead and get that started on your device, then we'll be using that as a way of you interacting with Doug during the webinar portion of things. Cool.
Mark, people are asking if there's an event code.
Yeah, if you click on that Slido link, it should take you directly to the event. And Ezekiel, maybe the event code, if you could check that out on the Slido app, it should be in there. Or Steve.
Yeah, thank you for prototyping something new.
Yeah, yeah. The link works.
Mark,
Does.
I want to say hello to Dave Phillips. We have Dave Phillips visiting us,
Awesome.
and
Hey, Dave.
Julie Bozak from New Hampshire.
Yeah, we've got Arnold, Colin, a whole bunch of our normal tribe are here. Jeff, Jennifer, welcome everybody. So we'll just let folks, they're starting to walk in the room, and we got about one more minute. We'll start in just a minute. But we're super happy and excited to hear from Doug Dietz. Doug's there in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Cool. All right. So I'd say we go ahead and get started. How about that, guys? Thumbs up already?
Jennifer and Jimena, yeah, some of the good old faces. Very good to see these people.
All right. So super quickly, today we will be in this webinar format, which is a little bit different, as Arna said. And we have a special guest, Doug Dietz. As most of you probably know, if you're on this webinar, you joined amongst other reasons to hear from Doug and some of his stories. So we're really, really excited about that. This will be a presentation, but as we mentioned just a second ago, we'll be using the Slido app, and we'll make sure that we put that link in there periodically so that anybody who joins, you can find that in the webinar chat. So we ask you to use that as a way of submitting your questions to Doug, and then we'll have we'll have 3 presentation sessions from Doug of about 8-ish minutes, and then we'll have about 8-ish minutes of Q&A with Doug. And then at the end, we're going to break for whatever remaining time we have for a little bit of discussion. And then we'll go to our ritual backstage, which will be after the hour, where we'll open up the Q&A to, we'll bring in another up to 100 people into sort of as panelists and have just sort of an open Q&A for that last half an hour. You're muted and you don't have your video on, so unfortunately you're just looking at the webcam crew, but we'll be highlighting Doug when he's speaking and his slides. If you want to submit questions, please use the Slido. And we are recording this session. It's live on YouTube, so anybody who has to jump early or wants to catch the backstage, if you have to leave at the top of the hour, you'll be able to catch that on our YouTube channel. And crew, did I miss anything?
No, we're fine. Let's hear from Doug.
Fantastic. So I'd like to introduce Doug Dietz. Doug will tell you a little bit about himself and his story, but we're really excited. We're kind of got in touch with Doug through one of his colleagues at GE Healthcare, Mark Sisko, who is one of our boot camp coaches. And, you know, I kind of heard about Doug from his pretty well-known TEDxSanJoseCA talk that we use from time to time in our courses. And, you know, I thought, wow, this guy, he knows this stuff. He's lived and breathed it, and is a deep practitioner in an area that is, if there is a human-centered design area, healthcare is certainly one of those. So we're very, very happy and super pleased to have you, Doug. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. It's great to be here for sure.
Yeah. So we'll hand it over to you, and looking forward to hearing your stories. And I'll stop the screen sharing and hand it over to you.
Do mine? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, it's funny. So this is not where I am. This background behind me, that's our kind of design thinking area that we have in GE Healthcare, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But I love to have that up as a background just to remind myself, as I did work with people live. So that's
back in the day, right?
Yeah. So sharing options. Something different came up than usual, guys. I just want to be sure.
Okay.
All righty.
There we go.
Awesome. Everybody see that okay?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, yeah, so I think this is going to be a great time to just share and have a bit of a Slido discussion. And one thing that's kind of cool with Slido is you'll see you can actually vote on some of the different questions, and some of the ones will float to the top so that we can get to as many as we can, which is kind of a neat format. So to introduce myself, so yeah, I work at GE Healthcare in Wisconsin in the headquarters building. And my background is industrial design, so I'm a product designer by trade, and I've worked at GE Healthcare for quite a while now. So I'm actually been working there 30 years, so quite a while. And in that experience of working at a large company like GE, this is exactly how I feel. So I thought I'd start with this slide, is that GE can kind of be a big hairball. It's got a lot of rigor and great things in there. Six Sigma, you guys know a lot of the great practices that General Electric has. But the stories actually I'm going to share with you today are really my journey around that big hairball. So kind of orbiting the giant hairball and kind of surviving in that corporate world with grace. And you guys have probably seen before, I think IDEO did it, that kind of the design thinking, scribble, that it's kind of a little bit the ambiguity at the beginning and it kind of evens out a little bit. And I just thought that was kind of a great way to introduce myself, is that talk to you guys a little bit about some stories. So GE Healthcare, we work on a lot of the equipment, and hopefully you guys haven't seen too many of these firsthand. So it's the MRI scanners and the mobile x-rays and a lot of different things, ultrasound, CT scanners. But the real reason that I'm here is that, those almost look like brochure shots. And the real world is more like this. So this is one of our portable ultrasounds that you can see more in context. So when I see those beautiful images that I showed first, there's no humans, there's no cables, it's just like a brochure shot, but the real world is so different. And I think design thinking is such an awesome way to bring out some of those things that make it very special. And even though I'm going to talk to you a little bit about examples within the healthcare world, I can imagine that these apply everywhere. I know when I work at Stanford at D School and do some of the things and interact with some of the students and executive training there, and see how design thinking applies to other areas, I just think it's so powerful. So here is, actually, I'm going to change my view there for myself. So I just wanted to kind of quickly go through this, just so that you guys, if I use terminology that's maybe a little bit different than you guys are used to, you kind of know where I'm going. I put in the upper right corner there kind of the main steps that Stanford has, and that you guys are all familiar with the empathy and define. But I think that, like a lot of you, probably when you bring those practices back to your organization, there might be some ways that you modify those to make design thinking pertinent for your group. So this is kind of the focus and flaring, how you feel during the design thinking mode. And then we put slightly different terminology to that. So they all start with I. So we have the inquire at the beginning. So that's our empathy phase of really inquiring out there and being humble. And then we have the ignite. And one thing that we do in the define phase, along with crafting the POV, is really igniting the team around that point of view. So I think having that point of view, so that then you can, it's almost like putting your thumb on the hose, and that it really helps you to, in the imagine phase or in the ideation phase, to flare out, is really to rally your team around that cause, around those unmet needs and desires of your users and of your patients, in my case, and of those users of that. And so we called it ignite. And then imagine is just such a great word. We decided to use that for ideate. And I'll talk to you guys about flaring out and then super flaring of some of the things that you can do for that. And then invent is, I think, such a great word for prototype. And then we add a little bit of storytelling at the end that we'll go through. And I thought I would throw this up, and then we added a couple of mindsets that we have in here. You guys are probably very familiar with these. And I put up the little tag on the left side is, how do we do some of these things virtual? And this might even be something you could test out Slido real fast and just type in maybe even which one of these are the toughest ones to do virtually. So for example, you know, the getting the focus on human values in the empathy phase of really making that connection, sometimes that can definitely be a little bit tougher when you're, you know, looking at a screen, and it's a little bit hard sometimes to do even the observational research. And then show, don't tell. So sometimes it's in the prototyping phase that can be a little bit challenging as well. But boy, there's some things that you can actually virtually do, which I think is a powerful thing, is whether it's radical collaboration or even embracing experimentation, is that we're experimenting today with Slido. But I think with having that ability to invite some people that might not be able to come to your workshop in person to do radical collaboration, whether that's co-collaboration with your customers or whether that's bringing in a teacher or a mom or somebody that's might have that diverse mindset that you really need to do that. And then I also think that creative confidence is such a huge part of design thinking. And I think that you can amp up creative confidence using some of the virtual tools for sure. So I'm curious, was there any questions or any thoughts of which were the toughest one of these mindsets to do doing virtual? Did we have anything that came up?
Yeah, show don't tell is coming up pretty pretty heavy, and then the creative confidence part of it. Yeah, so those speaks to the prototyping, the difficulty of doing prototyping.
Yeah, and I think cultivating team genius, we do a lot of, you know, team things, and then that's just hard to do virtual for sure. You can do a few, but it's not the same as doing some creative problem solving things with your team. Really cool. So hopefully we'll address some of those in the slides that come up. And then we talked a little bit about Slido. It sounds like you guys are on there, so feel free to put in some thoughts, and then we'll have moments where we pause a little bit. You can ask questions about some of the things that I've talked about and shown, but then you can also, boy, how would you do that virtually? And I just threw up this to remind me, this was a session we just did with our team in China. So these were some of our engineers, and we did a design thinking boot camp. And they were actually in China in one conference room, as you can see here, but then we had to facilitate and not be there. So that was interesting. So we can share a little bit more about that. So feel free to keep Slido up and using that. So the story I decided to share with you guys today is in the NICU. So this is the ICU for really small babies. They literally fit in the side of your hands, guys. They're just tiny, tiny babies. And the reason I decided I thought I would show this project that we worked on is it was, first of all, it was a really cool team effort. And then also it has the essence of product design and design thinking, how it influenced the product. And then also how design thinking influenced the software, so the screens and the UI. And then also kind of the umbrella over the top is how did design thinking actually apply to the whole experience of the NICU for this baby incubator. So I thought that if you're a software person or a product person or even an experienced person, there'd be a little bit of the story that would connect with you. So that was the reason we chose this to do. Here's actually, let me just, there we go. So here's a kind of my definition of empathy from Daniel Pink. Most of you guys are probably familiar with the author. And I just love the way he did this is, you know, empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes, feeling with his or her heart and seeing with his or her eyes. Not only is empathy hard to outsource and automate, but it makes the world a better place. And I like that part of, you know, and somebody told me this a while back, I wish I could give credit to who it was, is that, you know, walking in someone else's shoes is such a powerful way to gain that empathy. But first you have to take off your own. And I love that thought of, you have to take off your biases and your shoes first before you can put on somebody else's. And that gives you that, in this empathy phase, that real feeling of being open and humble to all these ideas that are coming in, and keeping some of your solutions and some of your ideas in the background at the beginning to really have those unmet needs and desires come into you. So at the top there, you see that little logo of the focus and flaring. So that'll bounce through the different sections, so you can kind of see where I am in the process. But I love that definition from Daniel. All right, why is it not forwarding, guys? Oh, there we go.
Yep, there you go.
So for you guys, you know, these are the little babies that are in a NICU incubator. So that kind of gives you a sense of what it is. So there's mom, and this is the a baby in the incubator. And we'll talk a little bit about this project that we worked on here. So in this first phase of the empathy and the kind of the consolidation of this, one thing that was really a bit crazy for me, to be honest with you, is gathering this insight. There was this kind of line that I drew in the middle of this slide where you had the family and some of the things that you were absorbing from their side in the NICU, and then you had the staff in the hospital on the other side. But those little boots at the bottom, the little baby, bridges both of those sides. So it was really crazy for us to go in. And these are just the highlights of some of the things that we realized when we were there, and the power of observation and the power of interviewing these people and just seeing what was happening in this situation. And some of the things that were on the family side that were very surprising to us and really helped us to create our POV was this is really the baby's first home. So usually mom and dad are hoping that the baby has just a normal delivery, and then they bring it home. They've got their nursery all set up and it's ready to go. And all of a sudden this happens, and their baby is born very early. And they're trying to make this incubator, and you can see they've had a little quilt that they've made to put on the top to keep it dark. They have some of the cards from family they put on here. So they've kind of cultivated this part of the hospital and this little area that their young baby is in to be its first home. And then we also noticed a lot of times with mom having a premature delivery, usually C-section, a lot of times could potentially be in a different hospital than the actual baby. So this moment where they get together for the first time, actually our unit didn't go quite low enough at the time, where she came in a wheelchair because she had a C-section. She couldn't stand up and interact with the baby like she wanted to. And then this need for connection. So you'll see in the point of view how important that is as far as the connection with the parents and mom with the baby, and how important that kangaroo care and some of that can be. But then on the hospital side, guys, we found out some really crazy things. There were so many multiple touch points, whether they had to change the diaper or get to the airway or take them through the hospital. You can see them up in the top, that entourage, bringing the whole with IV poles and the whole thing to go to surgery or to go get a scan. And that extra handling that they had to do with this little baby. And those diapers you see there, if you look at the far left one, if everybody held up their thumb to the camera, I can't see anybody but myself, but that's about the size of that diaper, is about the size of your thumb. They're tiny, tiny, tiny babies. And then there was a lot with infection control as far as in the hospital, there were things where they found out the sponge by the nurse's sink and their keyboard. Some of these areas really were areas where infection control was an issue. And the silence alarm button and some of the hard buttons we had on ours, anything they interacted with on our equipment and the other equipment around the room, were areas where that would be. Is there anything we could do with that? So the empathy was really, gathering this insight. And the two big things that we found out were, you could see directly from that observation, was it's really all about touch. It's where the clinicians have to touch that young baby and do the things that they need to do from the clinical side. And then there's that touch that mom has to have to make that real connection with her newborn baby. And this is the POV that we crafted. And a lot of you are practitioners, so you know how important it is to put a lot of juice in this point of view. Don't just make it be factual. We met Bob, and it's just really to get that heartfelt part of this, because the point of view for us in igniting the team is also something that can be shared with others, whether it's leadership or whatever, that understands if people go, what are you doing and why are you doing it? This is a great why card to show them. So here's what we crafted for this particular project. So we met emotionally stressed parents in the NICU that eagerly wanted to bring their baby home. We are amazed to realize, and then this is a direct quote from a staff member at University of Tennessee, that premature babies literally die a little every time they're touched. So these babies are just struggling with every moment to grow their organs and to do this. And when you touch them, that energy is taken away from these critical things that they're trying to do, even as a little one. So it would be game-changing to reinforce positive touches while reducing unnecessary interactions, allowing for a very small infant to spend their precious energy growing strong in the moments that matter. So one thing that I'm actually getting choked up here. Your POV has to be where when you share it like that, everybody wants to work on it with you. This is a powerful enough statement to rally your troop around. So I think that to give that time and the point of view to make something that is not just a step you're going through in the design thinking phase, it's something that really speaks to you. So I think that is something that is so powerful for us to do as a design thinking practitioners. So I think this is our first pause moment where we can take some time. You guys can type in on your Slido. We've talked a little bit about the inquire, which we call the inquire phase. So the empathy of gathering insights, and then also the ignite of the point of view of how to define that emotional opportunity space for you. And then we'll see what questions rise to the top. And then also there might be a little bit of thought here of how would you do this virtually? So we're in this crazy world where it's hard to go to the hospital and spend time like we did with the families and with the clinicians and take those pictures and interviews and videos. You know, how do you gather that insight that's so powerful that you can craft a point of view? So I'll throw it, I think, to Mark. Are you going to be asking the questions?
Yeah. I'm going to I'm going to ask Ezekiel to tell us what questions have risen to the top. But I do want to just mention what we'd like for everyone in the audience to do is use the Zoom chat to chat, and please just use the Slido to submit questions. And you can also, the good thing about Slido is you can upvote. So what we're looking for is if you see a question roll by on your screen that you like, just click like, and that one will float to the top. And those are the questions we're going to ask to Doug. So what do you got, Ezekiel? Do you have anything that's floated to the top?
Yes, we have a couple. So one is, how might we do immersive observation and empathy in a digital environment?
Super question. And I can give my 2 cents. I think one thing that in the healthcare space, sometimes it's tough to get in because, first of all, you don't want to get in the way of what's going on there, of course. And then it's also just with HIPAA rules, and there's a lot of really good policies in place. But I think virtually, if you can get that, if you can get that relationship, whether it's through your sales group or other groups, application specialists in our case, that have a connection with a hospital, you can have them use, it's funny. I think David Kelly from IDEO told me once, he goes, everybody can be a producer and a director and with their phone. And I just thought that was kind of cool in that, if you can have them, almost like a GoPro, but they're just holding their camera and walking through, let's say, their workflow or their process, and you can ask questions and you can see things, I think is a powerful way to do that. I know one time we were working with our GE appliance group, so they were doing a stovetop, and they had, so this is, you guys have probably seen this before, where, you're trying to relate what knob do you turn and what burner goes on, it's kind of a human factors thing. And they had a bicycle helmet on a grandma, and she had a GoPro on the top. And she was showing her kitchen. They were actually in her kitchen. They had a foam core mock-up that was there. But the powerful part was when you're watching that video, she was saying, and she's going around and she's opening up her drawers and all of her cupboards. And she's going, the thing I like about my kitchen the most is that I know where everything is. And she obviously doesn't know where everything is. She can't find anything. So I think one thing that's really cool about potentially virtual is that you can have some of these fly on the wall opportunities that you can do virtually, but then they're a little bit the director and they're doing that. And it might not be the exact same as if you were there in person for sure, but I think there's some good content that you can get.
Yeah. Cool. Ezekiel, do you have another one?
Great. Well, somebody else asked, what is the time frame for these projects and how many researchers are involved, or what's the size of the team?
Good question. This one we had so we did a design thinking boot camp for the whole team. So the whole team is probably 40 people. So this is marketing, engineering, designers, design researchers, everybody, to get up to speed on the basic elements of design thinking. And then we usually do a non-healthcare related boot camp. And then we go back and say, you remember how important that was to get the empathy on our boot camp project? Now let's get empathy on this project. And where do we go? What analogous industries do we look at? All that. So we do kind of a design research plan. And then there's a subset of that team that goes out and does these. So we usually have the product designer, we'll have a design thinking representative, we'll have our design researcher, and then a member of the team. So the people that go out, and usually we do global, so it can be quite lengthy. So we'll take a couple of months where we go out and get this insight, and it will be a multiple different people that do it and then bring back, and then we spend a whole day unpacking that insight when people come back. So the big team is everybody gets design thinking experience, and then subsets of that team go out and do the different different empathy ones. And then it's probably over a 2-month period of time for this phase to get up to the POV.
Cool. So I had a quick question for you, Doug. The POV is kind of the reframe problem statement, I guess, and you also had insights on that slide as well. So that's kind of part of what you do at that point where you're defining the POV. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it. I think it defines the opportunity space is the way I like to look at it. Is it really, and it captures that, and then of course this is the standard POV that Stanford does at D School. I think they've added some of the insight, or some of the, they've added a few other elements in there, but that's the basic one that we used for this one. And that's really to capture, you could say it is the problem statement, but it has a bit of that future look in the, in that, it'd be game changing or would change the world if this could happen. I think it's got that inspirational part to it as well, which I think is super powerful for the team to have at the beginning. And then I wonder if this means is another one that Stanford team has added in there. So sometimes as we met, we were made to realize, and we wonder if this means, so there's that, you know how when you do an empathy map and sometimes you have the direct observations and you have the things that you're inferring on this side. So you can add that inference in on a POV as well. And that inference is powerful to just think about, I wonder if this means, and then it would be game changing to do this.
Right. Cool. Excellent. So we can continue to ask Doug questions, but perhaps we can go into this next segment, Doug. Just
awesome.
We're close to the bottom of the hour.
Great questions. So now we're jumping, if you look at the top in the little code, we're kind of in that flaring mode of ideation, of looking at that in the imagined phase. And I just put a compilation here that helped you guys see kind of how we did this and the diversity that we brought in. And you can see the gentleman that's at the top, I believe, was one of the healthcare at the hospital administrators. And then we were gaining some of the insights from him from that kind of perspective. You can see on this one, we had a mom, and she was sharing some ideas. And actually what she was doing there is we were actually having her help us to cluster and prioritize some of the insights that were coming in. So from her perspective, we could cluster those together and see what would move the needle for her. And I believe her first baby was born premature, excuse me. And then in the ideation phase, and you can see some of the visual sketches that were done. And then a lot of it's text like you guys are used to, where you're just writing ideas down on a sticky note that you can move around and cluster. But what I like, and I like to say a lot, is that the design thinking modes, in fact, I almost don't like them to be like in a linear format because it feels like a process with toll gates and all that kind of stuff, is it is much more iterative and circular. So on the lower left one there, you can see actually those are some of the team that's actually working, and they were just in the ideation phase, they were bringing in just junk that was in the studio to kind of semi-prototype, just talk through what they were thinking. But if they're tired of sticky notes, this sometimes can be very powerful. And especially if you have a lot of engineers that like to think visual and think with their hands and make stuff, those ideation and prototyping can certainly overlap a little bit. And you shouldn't say, oh, we're going to get to that. Just hold off and, you know, hang with the sticky notes. You know, we got stock with 3M. And then on the lower right side, what is really interesting was, I remember this for sure, is this team said, hey, let's just improvise this and see what it's like. So you be the mom, I'm going to be the nurse, I'm going to put on this blue thing, and then you put on this scrub and you're going to be the doctor. And they are actually improvising as they were thinking through the problems and the ideation. So they were taking that kind of experience mode of how that would be. So in this mode, I think it's just important to adjust a little bit, not maybe have one way of doing it and think of different ways. And then I did throw a sketch up there that was we had a team of industrial designers there, and we had an industrial designer that captured some of these opportunities in just a really rough, it doesn't look rough, but a quick sketch that shows, hey, what if this was more of a care station and it was a mobile, and then, you know, there was the digital scale is over here, and, you know, they were putting a little bit more focus on some of these ideas that people could see, but again, they're still very rough, is what was happening here with the ideation. You'll see how that bridges into kind of the prototyping. And what we found out here, you can see that actually that's a similar picture to the other phase on the build to learn, and really, you know, this learn early and learn cheap mode, is that team was thinking about. I remember it was one of the team members said, you know, we were just at the Chinese restaurant and had the big lazy Susan that you rotated the dishes around, you could share. What if we had a baby Susan? So we actually had something the baby could be on, and we can rotate that so we're not actually touching the baby to rotate him around to change the diaper, and then we rotate around to get to the airway or something that you need to do at the head, and then you're literally not touching the baby until you're doing that moment. And so they were thinking about that. And then the same team was thinking about, hey, with that infection control, how can we make it a little bit better so we can have some hands-free interaction that we can have, and maybe it's a touch screen that's easier to clean, and we don't have as many knobs, and we maybe can silence the alarm with a hand gesture versus actually touching something. So they were thinking through all of the experience and the workflow of the staff that was in there. And then I remember the UI kind of team that was thinking about looking at the user interface for the nurse that's coming in, and going through some of the things that were very important for her. And what they did realize was that it was a bit like a DOS screen, the old blue one. It was kind of a little bit, you know, factual, and you had to walk up and really look closely at it to see what it was. And then there was a knob you turn to go to different levels and see what that's like. And they started thinking about, in this mode of prototyping, is what is important to that nurse to do, and how could we present that in a different way so that maybe she didn't have to come into the room quite as far to interact with this user interface, and could give the family a little bit more privacy. And you'll see in the final solution, there were some really powerful things that came out of that allow the nurse to do a great job of monitoring, almost easier than today, but then also not have to come in and be right up in the equipment. And then the other thing they noticed is, even with that kind of simple text interface, the parents were taking pictures of that, and they actually were then sending it to grandma and grandpa that couldn't be there, or brothers and sisters, or whatever. It's just like, hey, here's how she's doing, and take a picture, and they would send that. Is the team said, hey, how could we make this information be a little bit more graphic, a little bit more usable, and also almost like a postcard, so that when you take a picture of that, you can send it out. And you'll see in a minute the solution that came out, which was beautiful. And then the other thing that came out, if you remember the picture of the whole entourage of nurses and IV poles coming through the hospital, what if you could have, and you can see this super rough model, I love this model, of the shuttle, is that somebody had taken almost like the casters off of a chair, and they put it on something, and there's some foam core box. Okay, this could be the battery. And what if we had the oxygen bottles, and you can see those are just like plotter paper tubing, And then I think they even talked to some nurses and they actually markered in that red, they markered the different position of the controls and what we could have. So that would be actually almost like a little mini forklift that you put in the back of the NICU incubator, and then you could go through the floor just with 1 or 2 people. And then also they are all plugged into the gases and oxygen and battery and everything that NICU incubator and baby needed. And then so if you were going to surgery and all of a sudden it was delayed a half an hour, no big deal. You could just sit there, and it was just like they were plugged into the NICU, or they're going down to radiology to get an exam, a MR or a CT or something. You could take this along with you. So this was the rough prototype of thinking about the hospital workflow in here.
Cool, Doug. So we're at Q&A for this portion. It's really cool to see how this is all sort of evolving through time in a way, and kind of follow up on the question about the team size. Practically speaking, what is the timeline roughly that you've gone through, so people understand how many months have gone by when you know, from the point that you're doing your research to the point that you're doing your ideation and then prototyping?
Great question. So I think actually one of the longer phases was actually that empathy phase at the beginning, because for a global product, you have to do that globally and all that, and then come back and unpack that. And I think the ideation phase, that was a lot shorter. I think we went through the ideation and prototyping phase. We probably went through that in probably a month or 2. So we're probably about, I don't know, 4 months in, 3 to 4 months in to where we are in the presentation here. And then you could see, which I think is the real power of both the ideation mode, it's about the idea, not the sketch, or not the fidelity of what that is. And you could see for sure in the prototyping, those UI screens were super rough. The prototype of the shuttle and the prototype of the baby Susan and some of those things were super, super rough. So you can get to those quick. So it's really about the idea. And then the way I like to think of it too, and you guys have probably heard this being practitioner design thinking, is you slow down to go fast. And the slow down part is really to get the empathy and to immerse yourself in the problem. But as soon as you start doing these low fidelity models, you feel your team and go vertical. You feel your team going vertical. So I think it was probably that 4-month mode where we started feeling like, oh my gosh, these are some great ideas. Let's put these in front of these really crappy prototypes in front of the customer and see what they think.
Right. Cool. So Ezekiel, from Slido, what kind of questions have bubbled up to the top?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a mashup of questions, because I'm seeing some.
I love it, the mashup.
Yeah, so I think that so a 2-part question about just emotions, Doug. So on the one hand, how do you prepare the research team and acclimate the designers to go into this very highly sensitive and emotionally charged type of research?
Oh, it's tough. And this is a great conversation to have, and we could maybe talk a little bit more about it in the backstage. But I think your design researchers, folks that have anthropology, have a lot of those different, natural, they're going to take a bit of the lead when it comes to some of this. And then they've been trained in some of the techniques, and they're going to help the team to understand these are the techniques we're going to use. So even though you've done a boot camp, you're not going to make an engineer or a marketing person go in there and be in charge of everything. So there's a little bit of that prep work to do there. But also, I really like maybe I should phrase it this way. We shy away from the emotional aspects of what we do all the time because they're a little bit uncomfortable and we're not quite sure how to react in those. But that's where some of the best insights and the best ideas and the best stuff comes from. So I think it's really impactful to have maybe not the whole team, but a good subset of the team experience this. Because even as you could see Daniel in his definition at the beginning of empathy is you can't transfer this empathy to somebody else, even if it's a video. But if they're there and they see the struggles that Nurse Sue has with this, they're going to come back and be an advocate for that person. So I think the prep work there is a little bit to be open to these ideas and be like a kindergartner and just asking the 5 whys and getting a lot of this insight in here. But it probably is going to be emotional, and it should be.
Yeah, and it connects directly to the storytelling component, which you're going to talk about as well, I think. Ezekiel, do you have another one.
Yeah, so on the flip side of that question is how do you recruit people to interview and to share who are participating in these very emotionally charged situations. So how do you recruit them? How do you manage those communications and navigate biases and emotional attachments and so forth?
Boy,
and then
you guys,
finally, how do you boil that down into a persona? Like how do you come out with some personas out of
Yeah.
the whole?
great question. One way that we do a lot, and like I mentioned earlier, getting into the hospital, there's the getting in their way part, and then there's also you can't go in there with an entourage. We really leverage our sales team. So we talk to our salespeople, because the last thing too is you don't want to go into a hospital and interrupt some kind of a sales situation. So we usually use them a lot, and then they can do a couple things. One, they can say, hey, here's a friendly customer that's going to allow you to come in, and then you can see our equipment and see what changes. By the way, here's one we're trying to get into. They have one of our competitors' equipment and maybe one of ours. You can go in there, and then that allows you to see a little bit of the competitive experience and see and ask them questions about that, which is really powerful. So to answer that, we leverage a lot of our sales folks to do that, especially globally, to help us with that, so that we go in and have a good understanding of that. And then the second part of your question, could you repeat that for me, please?
Yeah, so one was recruiting, then navigating the emotions and biases and just that emotionally charged
Yeah, the
state
emotionally
that someone
charged
takeover.
part, that's it's such a great question, because especially my space is so emotionally charged almost all the time, which means you really need to fix some stuff. As we all know, when we bump into healthcare, it needs a lot of work. So yeah, that's a part. And I think prepping and going in with the team, I think we do a little bit of training to set up the team that's going to go in. And again, that's usually led by a design researcher, but then they're in there to help to gather that information. There's a lot of the kind of setup of that emotional part, for sure. These are families that are struggling. So you're going to go in there and really be humble, and don't try to fix anything. Just get their unmet needs and desires and bring those back as a team and do that. And there's going to be a huge emotional content to this. And then we do take that into personas. And then we usually have multiple POVs. I just shared one with you. We have multiple POVs that sometimes we'll have the portfolio person, we'll have multiple teams working on certain things. And then we can pull that together. That's real important to do too, because you can imagine, for me, there's probably somebody in the hospital that's looking at, the Phillips and Siemens, and, there's a spec sheet, and they're looking at costs and service contracts and all that kind of stuff. So they might make the decision what to buy. You got the radiologist that looks at the images and are thinking about image quality and some of that. Then you got the technologists that actually work with our equipment and know how to use it to get that image. They're a user. And then of course you cascade down into the patient. So you have these multiple levels that you need to gather. So it's not uncommon at all to have a bit of a POV for each one of those personas, and then see where they overlap and see how you can do that. Because there's going to be some elements that are going to come from the radiologist or the technologist or the CIO, and of course the patient.
Yep. It's a bit of an art, that balancing act, right? How you pull all that together, and then how that ends up translating into the sort of final product specifications, I guess, right? So tell us a little bit, because conscious of time, tell us a little bit about storytelling, and feel free to follow up on what I just mentioned if you wanted to.
Yeah, no problem. And I just threw a couple of these pictures up here just to close out the kind of the Imagine Invent. This was some neat work that people were using the Lego Serious Play of how do you do it virtually, and then so they would send out the kit of the Legos, or a lot of people have Legos at home, but they were doing different things with the Legos and doing that. And I know we just finished a session where we actually sent out prototypes, and we actually even sent out an iPad that they had that were in this box. And then it had like a game board that you opened up, And then you put the iPad over here. Then it said, okay, your prototype 1 is here and 2, and then here's some cards that we're going to go through and some imagery. And then when we did the one-on-one with the user, we could go through that, and they would have things in front of them that were tangible, and then we were doing that. So that's kind of a cool thing. Yeah, here's kind of a little bit of the solution before we get to storytelling, and the storytelling is kind of the thing. So this is the giraffe care station, so you can kind of see what came out of all the things I've been talking about. So you can see there in the middle, that's actually the baby Susan. So that's actually the unit that rotates around so you can get to the baby in different locations. And then actually at the same time, we said, hey, what if we did integrate our digital flat panel that slides in almost like a pizza box on the right there that slides in underneath the baby. Then you can bring in the mobile X-ray unit and actually take that quick shot of them without touching them at all. So that helped out a lot. And then we integrated the scale in there as well. And then you can see that picture on the left is that a screenshot of the actual screen itself. So you can see one thing that is powerful is that, first of all, the information the nurse needs, you can see that's in the big white text, so the 36.5, but also the screen is in the first person of the baby. So my last weight was, my temperature is, it's all from her or his, the baby's point of view. And then since it's called the giraffe care station, it has kind of the, like your car GPS, it has the light mode during the day, and then at night it gets dark like this screenshot is, and then the giraffe rolls up and falls asleep when it goes into the night mode. And then this also has the silence alarm button that's just a motion gesture that you put in front. So this is a whole touch panel. And then you can get to the other displays when you come up to the unit to do certain things. But the majority of the time it's in this more almost like a postcard version thing. And you can see with these changes, the negative touches, so the touches that you don't want to have happen because then the baby dies a little every time they're touched, was reduced 58%. And then this shows you a little bit of in the storytelling. So the project team, to give you an idea again of the project, is that we weren't able, and I think everybody on the call has been here, where you can get everything you want in the first release. And I just give such props to this team because they were so patient in that they introduced some of the things on the project timeline, like the baby Susan and some of the things on the equipment side first. Then as in parallel, then the team is coming up with the user interface, and then they introduce that a little bit later. And then you can see here's the shuttle. So remember the really crappy prototype. So you can see the nurse on the back with the handle. She actually has that where the oxygen bottles and the gases and everything. And you just dock that to the back of the unit, and then it actually docks to multiple units. This is actually a different one than the giraffe. And then you can take it through the hospital to do that, which I think is really cool. And then the kind of the power to the storytelling is this project, when they went back and the team measured some of the successes some of these features had that were directly related to the insights gathered through design thinking, the revenue for this product doubled and their market share went from 30 to 86%, which I think is gigantic. I'm not a marketing person, but I looked at this and I go, I know that's good. But what was actually more important for me actually was the team themselves, after going through this, they had, it wasn't quite this image, but they have a beautiful image in their office. And then they came up with this, sending moms and babies home healthy. This is what we're here for. This is our mission. This is our purpose. And I love that. So you almost think of a sports team that puts their hands in and, you know, they say defense or whatever. This team put their hands in and said, we're going to send mom and baby home healthy. And that's what they did. So I think that is just such a powerful statement for the team and for design thinking in that. So I guess if we have any questions for the kind of the inspire mode, this was actually, and then actually this, I think this one is kind of a great one to kind of close with and see if there's any questions. Is that I think most people here, when you think about how to share things, they're familiar with the hero's journey or the Pixar map, is that you have your character and kind of your scene and the context at the beginning of a good story or a good movie. And then you build that tension in the story. And then it's like, what is the challenge? And then what were you amazed? What were the tensions? What were the surprises? And why should you care? And then at the very top, the tension, there's a realization that comes to your team and to you. And sometimes there's a sage there, you know, that gives you that insight. And that sage is usually the people that you've interacted with, your customer during co-collaboration. And then you overcome that challenge with your solutions and your ideas and your different things that you've come up with. And then hopefully that story is strong enough that at the end there, that little tail there is that it's worth telling to other people. So that can be leadership or whoever. But I'm sure if you guys were here and I asked you, what does this look like? And you guys would say, oh my gosh, this is the POV statement. We met, so your character. We were amazed to realize is your challenge, why you're here is going up. Your realization could be even, I wonder if this means some of your inferences there. And then of course, all of your solutions you come up with, your game changer for your challenges that are directly related to those, the challenges are overcome with these solutions. And then that's a powerful way to tell it. So I think when you use design thinking, think about that, how you share your story, whether it's a video or something, even if it's a PowerPoint. I think my daughter says, where's the power? What's the point? There might be other ways to tell the story that are more powerful than PowerPoint. But if it is PowerPoint still, you know, there's a way that you can tell a story that follows this proven technique of messaging what you're trying to do.
Well, Doug, I don't know that there's anybody that tells stories quite as well as you.
I don't know about that.
At least not on our Wednesday web jam so far. So I really thank you. That's been amazing. And we have a few more minutes that we can take some questions. What's bubbling up, Ezekiel?
So again, some themes. How are you adapting your design research and then your workshopping to the digital space due to COVID or any other COVID restraints that you want to speak to?
Great question. We're doing our best. We've done a bunch of different pilots. We've crashed and burned a couple times. We've learned along the way. We're not there yet. We're still struggling. You know, is it like this where we have Zoom and then we have breakout rooms? Do we have mural or some whiteboard that's dynamic in the background? So we're still playing around a lot with that. But I think the thing that I would say there is don't plan the planning meeting. Don't keep talking about what we should do, let's go investigate, just frickin' do it. So pick a platform, don't care what it is, and go out there and just give it a shot and see how it works. And because you're gonna learn no matter what. And you're going to learn more by doing than you are by planning in this mode. For me, that's my perspective on that. And then we've had some really great ones that have been just awesome with users and co-creation and doing some of those things. So it's definitely doable, and it's going to be slightly different for whatever you're trying to do. There, you know, the format could be different a little bit, but I think use design thinking on this. So how do you design think the best virtual workshop, and then give it a shot.
Yep. Somebody else asked just the length and structure of workshops in this digital form. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Super great question. And that's where we've crashed and burned. I think when we started, we knew that it wasn't going to be the same as like a 3-day boot camp and we're going to have people for 3 days, full day. But our workshops we had that were too long, and we realized that kind of 2.5 to 3 hours is kind of the max that you can have for a workshop. And then we've broken those up into sessions. So we've done a couple where we've done a morning session and then done an afternoon. And then a lot of times what we've done is we've done a 2.5 hour session on a day. We've given them some really cool homework to go out, and then they can interact with that content and then come back and unpack that on the next day. And what we found out with that doing virtual is that really respects the folks that are maybe a little bit more introverted, or they're a little bit more, maybe even English is not their native language, so they can kind of percolate through this and figure it out and give some really conscious thought to it. And then they come back and present it the next day. So it's less the improv style yes and that you have in person, like this workshop behind me where everybody's working together. But that respects that moment of giving some of that thought and then coming back. But from my perspective, that 2.5 hours is kind of magic. And then sometimes break that up into multiple days. So
how are you helping now these stakeholders, doctors and nurses and other people who are very set in their ways. How are you, what kind of strategies are you employing now in the times of COVID to help them shift towards different ways of thinking and working?
Boy, that's a really good question in this COVID world. I know one thing that works both pre-COVID and COVID is to invite them into the design thinking process with you. So I think even if you show your user that super low fidelity rough prototype, that's too late. So that time between where you spent time in the empathy and that's, so I think to show them the ideas and get their ideas and yes and with them in that ideation phase and even super flare with them, and then prototype and get their insight there, because a lot of those are just probes and reasons to get more empathy. They're not to sell the solution in the prototyping. That's why you show them something so crappy, because you want them to say, man, you need help. And you go, yes, I do. And then they help you to move that forward. So I think that helps a lot with, especially if they're a little bit set in their ways, or you're showing them something very new way to do something, is have them along that development process, because really it should be kind of their idea along with you versus your idea that you're trying to sell to them.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have 2-3 people generally asking how, if they're earlier on starting out, how do they develop more creative confidence and kind of exercise their creativity day to day?
Oh yeah, creative confidence is so important. Maybe a couple things. I think to lean into it and put yourself out there a little bit. I think to get a mentor really helps if there's somebody that you really respect their creativity. Maybe they understand if it's design thinking or other processes. It could be agile, it could be lean. There's some really cool ones out there that integrate some of the iteration processes where you need that creative spirit to do that. And then that can be at work and that can also be at home. You could have somebody at church or whatever that's like, whoa, that person is so creative, and then have them mentor you. I think that would help a lot. But more than anything, I'd say lean into it. I mean, some of the best ideas that we've gotten at GE have been from on a design of a product, have not come necessarily from a product designer. It could be somebody that's in finance or somebody that's in HR that have been part of this project team that have worked on this and been able to come up with this. And some of our, I think we had one, it was a couple of months back where I think after a session, it was a 3-day session. This was pre-COVID. I think we had 6 patents that came out of that session. And when I looked at the list of the people on the patent, there were more people like finance and HR, and actually even customers were in on that patent for that idea, because good ideas come from anywhere. And, if somebody puts an idea out there and then somebody builds on that and puts another idea out there, the diversity of those ideas and that creative intersection of where they go is where the magic is. And that magic is not going to come if people don't share and have a little creative confidence to share that idea, even if it's kind of crazy. Because it's those crazy ideas. If you think of things like Uber or Airbnb, if somebody threw that idea out all by itself, a stranger shows up in their car and you say, that's never going to work, vote it down, where if it gets that kind of creative spirit, is there might be a intersection there. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a social part of this. This might work. Let's pilot it or whatever. Great question.
Yeah. So Doug, thank you so much. We're getting to the top of the hour, and I just want to plug next week's Wednesday Web Jam really quickly, and then we'll go to the Backstage. So next week we have some colleagues of ours or friends of ours from out in San Francisco that are going to join us as the climate designers, which is going to be really interesting. They're going to be doing the next 2 sessions, Mark O'Brien and Sarah Harrison, from a consultancy called The Determined, and they're going to tell us a little bit about climate design, and I actually challenging all of the web jammers to be bold. I think that's part of what they're going to be communicating to us. So cool. And then now I think we will move, thanks to the crew here. And again, thank you so much, Doug, for joining us. And we're going to move into the Backstage and open it up to everybody. All our friends are going to be joining as panelists, as you can see now. And we're still live on YouTube, so keep it to nice language and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
gotcha. Yeah.
Because on
Okay.
YouTube, they only have nice language.
Yeah, right. We could get banned or something like that, you know.
Might.
I think it's Pedro who needs the warning.
Yeah, we got to watch out for Pedro.
Yes, I'll be careful. Absolutely.
Welcome, everybody.
So,
What kind of questions?
And then do I need to stop sharing, or did I already?
Oh, I need to stop sharing. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
you
okay.
need to stop
There
sharing.
we go. I see
So,
faces.
we can move into.
So if you go into gallery view, it's always really cool to
I
see.
love
Yeah.
it. I'm actually going to take
Yeah.
my chat window down too, because I want to see everybody's face.
So we're trying
there
as
we
fast
go.
as possible to promote you guys to panelists. Okay, but the ones who are already panelists, yes, we can all start talking. Go ahead.
Go ahead, just all together.
All together, please. Yes.
Who would like to kind of?
Yeah, put your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's a question. Just go and unmute yourself. Because you have I think you have the power now.
I've got one. Hi, Doug.
Hey, Emma. Hey, Emma.
Emma.
Hey.
Oh,
Nice to-
where are you so I can see you? Are you waving? Where are you?
Wave your hands, Emma. Put your ears
There you
on.
go. I can put my
Oh, I
ears
see you.
on.
I see you. I see you.
Hi, Emma.
Hi. No, I just want to say thank you for that talk, because I really felt your empathy as you were talking through it, and I just really appreciate that. And for you, I was wondering if you were mentoring someone and developing empathy inside the organization, what would you say to them?
When it directly related to empathy, or
empathy, and just because I really felt when you were talking and communicating that, and your ability to kind of get everyone on board to be empathetic. And there's so many more different stages, that not just that first stage where empathy comes on, it goes through that whole process.
Oh, you bet. And you can imagine empathy is probably my favorite thing. If I was mentoring somebody, I would say, and this might go a little bit more toward guys too, is that guys are very stoic, never show their emotions. What are the facts? And I have to work and mentor guys a little bit different than women. Guys are a little tougher, you boneheads, just to get them to actually open up, and they have the same emotions and same feelings. They just put them down a couple levels, and to allow them to just feel that. And it's okay to feel those emotions and get connected to those emotions, because that's what's going to drive the project. And to be honest with you, that's what's going to drive your sales. I mean, that's why I chose this project to share with you guys, because when you connect to those things, as you guys know, like Simon Sinek, when he talks about the brain and it's a limbic area that makes the decisions, those are what we're talking about here, is how do we make the connections with those to make that. They're not going to make the decision on the spec sheet of, what the baud rate is. They don't care. But if you talk to them about sending mom and baby home early, is pretty powerful. So that's what I would mentor. And don't be afraid of it. And then as a team, and especially global teams, it can be a little bit different too, with the comfort of when the emotions come up and when they don't come up. But I think embrace those is something that you have to do. And then as coaches and facilitators, you all need to model that behavior.
Just love that point in the POV, because I could really feel when you were really saying that, and you could connect with it at that point. So it was amazing. Thank you.
Well, and I have that little picture of the baby up there with mom. I mean, it tugs on your heartstrings. But you need that reason to get in your car and go to work, or in these days to fire up your laptop. And it's got to be something that connects to that, because then that's going to make it worthwhile. And if somebody asks you what you're doing, you just can't wait to give them that elevator speech of how impactful this is, and give them your why, your purpose.
Yeah.
Cool. Emma's right next to James, and you guys are both from the UK. Go, James.
Hi,
you got a
James.
question?
Hello, thank you. Yeah, welcome.
Whoops.
Nope.
Uh-oh.
Can't hear you, James.
Oh, James, you are.
All this
Right.
technology.
Yeah. You fell into the like.
Well,
Few people I've ever heard use the phrase.
James, we didn't hear you. You were breaking up. You were breaking up. Now
Yeah,
we can
so-
hear you. But go again.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
you're one of the few people I've ever heard use the phrase
Oh,
It's British accent. This is what it is. It's breaking
I think
apart everything.
Truly global.
Perfume? Is it?
We'll come back to James. We'll come back to James.
Something about perfume, I think.
James, yeah, write your question. You're breaking up, James. You have to maybe type it. So we type it in the chat.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
You were
James.
breaking.
Mona
come back
has
to you,
her
James.
hand up, I think.
who are we going to?
Mona?
Oh, I like the hand that you can actually literally see it in the corner. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who is that down? Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
I see you down there in the mountains.
my fake mountains to make me feel better about life.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you all for sharing and for hosting this. My question is, I work with a lot of folks in other countries. I typically live in Kenya, but I'm back in the US right now. And what we've been noticing in our wanting to do co-design, co-creation is a lot of our folks that we work with don't have computers. So when they are joining us virtually, they're joining on the phone, which means that's hard for them to look at the Zoom or whatever, and then go to another screen or go to another screen. So just curious if you have any examples or suggestions of how to do this in a very low resource setting. Thanks.
That is a super great question. And of course, you should really, really lean into that because those are probably the folks that need it the most. And don't let the technology woes get in the way. I think there has to be a little bit more prep work, and that you need to just think about, okay, if they're just on the phone and they don't have the video capability, how are we going to handle that? And if there's some other ways that you can do that. And then it might be similar to what we had to do with some of our patients / user customers, is where we had to actually mail them little kits. And then we literally thought about the unboxing of that, almost like Apple does of their products. Is that okay? It comes, it has a welcoming message. Then you open it up and you lay these things out here. So even if you're just on the phone, you can ask them about certain things and talk you through that. And then the big thing there, I know that I've learned, is that people aren't natural at just talking about what their brain is doing. So I'm grabbing my coffee mug and I'm bringing it up, and then I really like to hold it about in the middle because that's where it's comfortable. And then I bring it up to my mouth, and then I'm thinking out loud. So you need to almost do a couple of warm-up sessions with them, almost like as simple as that, so that they can kind of walk through. Because then when you're walking through the prototypes or the ideas that are in front of them, or just the empathy gathering, that they're using those muscles to talk out loud and give you all of the insight, because the insights that are the most impactful are the ones that they're probably not going to say in the first round, and you're going to have to ladder and dig on those. So you mentioned frustrating. Tell me a little bit more about that. And then you're going to dig into that emotion that's closer to the center, and to do that, they're going to have to talk out loud. And sometimes that can be just as powerful without a video. Great question, Mona.
So Pedro, you want to ask James's question?
I love that. Yeah.
James was asking, do you always use the term purpose rather than challenge to connect to that emotional level of the team?
Ooh, good question. I didn't notice I did that a lot.
That would be a no.
I would say I maybe don't consciously do it, but I do think about that, is that, what is the why? What is the purpose? And so I don't know if I consciously do that, but I'm glad it came out and you noticed that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did have I was working with a pediatric hospital once, and they had, return on investment, ROI, and they kept talking about ROM. And I was like, I don't, I'm not a marketing person, so it's probably like a term I don't know. So finally I just said, sorry, you guys have used ROM a couple of times. I'm just curious, you're measuring your ROM. What is that? And they said return on mission. So that's about purpose. That's about the why. We're measuring ourselves on the return on our mission, not on investment and some of that. That's as important for sure. We need to stay in business. But they talked about it as return on mission, and I love that. So I use that a lot for myself and for my team. What's our return on mission to do this workshop? What is the return on mission to do this?
Cool.
Yeah, I have a
We
question.
have Jennifer down at the bottom.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I've actually like two questions. One of them is like, do you, in your process, use behavioral science at all? Because there's a lot about empathizing and psychology that I can imagine would be interesting.
I think so. I think for sure. I think we have some really good both design researchers that have a little bit more of that background that help to collaborate. And we have a clinical psychologist on our team that does some really cool stuff that we bring in to work on that as well, as far as that goes. And then I think a lot of times we'll bring in content like how many, just with a show of hands, know Brene Brown?
Mm-hmm.
A couple people, and just, she's more of a research psychologist and has some really good insight on vulnerability and some of that really how to both open yourself up for yourself, but also on a project. And she has a couple of really cool TED Talks, and sometimes we'll even show those to get people in the right spirit to do that. Because I think there is a huge part of psychology that goes with this, whether it's even just how the team works together. We call it cultivating the team genius, how you respect and trust each other. Most of the time in the workplace, we don't have that where it needs to be to actually push toward real, impactful innovation, because we're still trying to rate ourselves against the next person. And there's all kinds of stuff in the business world that get in the way of true innovation. And I think some of the psychology part, you need to break through that to push into that for sure.
Okay.
Really interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question? Like, what skills do you want to train your team to become even better?
Boy, you got some good questions. Skills for my team. My team is awesome. That's, good advice for anybody, is put a team around you that's better than you. And I've definitely done that. So yeah, what would I do to get myself better? Yeah, they're an awesome team. I think the big thing is diversity. So for example, on we call it our Menlos after Menlo Park for Thomas Edison for GE, our design thinking Menlo practice. Megan is she's a biomed engineering, so she has that engineering background, and Emil is a PhD in chemistry, so he has some of that side of things. And then we have, the clinical psychologists, and we have industrial designers and user interface designers, and then also bringing in the diversity of the team. That was really new for us at GE. Is, most of the time in the global design organization that I'm in that has all the designers, they would throw the challenge over the wall, and then they come back in a month and look at sketches and say, I don't agree with that, and whatever. There was always this struggle. As soon as we lowered those walls down in global design and allowed the extended team to come in and be part of the design thinking process, and let's go out together and get the empathy. Let's work together to create the different POVs. Let's work together to do the ideation. So you've got the HR person in there, you've got the finance person in there. That diversity is probably the biggest thing that's helped us. And then everybody is stoked to work on the frickin' project, right?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We had Frankie Koch, who's had his hand up for a while. Frankie?
Thanks, Doc, for sharing. And
where's Frankie? Oh, there he is. I got you. Thanks for having your hand up.
I'm curious, right? In which situation or circumstances that design thinking is the best to apply, and we should use other process like maybe customer development. Yeah, at least I'm just curious on that. Like which situation we should use which.
Yeah, I didn't go to the last slide on my deck. I could share that, but I can share it verbally a little bit because that's a good question. And I know that was just a bit of a struggle we had at GE back in probably 2009 when we started to interject design thinking within our practices. As we had Six Sigma, we had the early parts of the Toyota Lean. I think it was a little bit pre-Agile, but Agile was kind of coming up there. And then everybody was like, oh, we got to take this training. Is this the new flavor of the month? Are we not Six Sigma anymore? Are we this? Are we not? And we realized right off the bat is that design thinking needs to be a complement to these things. And in this discovery phase, the early part of a process, design thinking has such great assets and great techniques to get that problem and, you know, really understand what the right problem is. And then I think a lot of times, especially with the agile and lean folks, we talk about a smart hypothesis. So a lot of times in lean, you've probably seen that where they come up with a hypothesis and they do some things and they show it pretty early to get insight, the MVP, the minimally viable product. So what we say is, hey, you know, that hypothesis you have in the beginning of your process in lean, let's make that a smart hypothesis. Let's go out a little bit earlier. Let's get some insights from the user. So that first hypothesis you have is smart. It comes directly from your users. And then you still go through some of your things, which, by the way, you guys call it MVP. We call it a prototype. It's the same thing. It's build to learn, right? Okay, let's say that, build to learn. So we give them the tools to do that. Because one thing we found out at GE for sure is, even in some of the training, it'd say, okay, now go out and come up with some good ideas in this time frame, but not how to do it. So I think design thinking gives you that great how. Okay, let's get the improv mindset. Let's learn how to yes and with each other. We're all going to flare out together. We're going to decide later how to do that, but we're not going to do that at the same time. We're not going to try to flare out and make decisions at the same time. That's going to stifle it. So those are the tools that you need to do, or analogous inspiration or reframing. There's all those cool design thinking tools that allow you in that mode in the other practices to give them the tools to actually do that. Super powerful. But communicate it that way is it's not a versus, okay, it's Six Sigma versus design, because you're going to lose that battle. All right. And why even battle? Just how are we going to help you? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you. And you can continue doing your practices and everything. And where are you struggling? Oh, you're struggling there. I tell you what, there's a design thinking practice we can do there. Great question, Frankie.
Cool question from Maria D'Amico, and she has, and I'll try to involve Michael Thorley. I think he's still online, which was, okay, working with babies, that's so cool, but what does it work also if you have to work with banks? You know, do you get the same kind of empathy? And I've been doing some work with banks, and indeed, when you're talking about credit, and credit concession is quite different in Europe than in the US. We don't have the FICO scores and things like that, but it's really about understanding about the other person's life, and why do they need a bigger house? Could they afford it? Will they become a lifelong client? How do you build this trustworthy relationship? In the end, in those cases that the bank is not so sure, and should they give or should they not give credit, the difference is really about trust, and how do you build mutual trust and confidence and commitment from both sides into going into such a deal. And it might be the small entrepreneur trying to launch a new business, the young family trying to have a baby and they need to move to another apartment. So it's actually a very human business in the end. Especially in these bigger decisions. Michael, I know you also have some experience with banks. I hope you're still online, otherwise I'll just make a fool of myself calling for you.
I'm still here, Pedro.
Okay, goodness.
The thing I would add to what you've said is you're looking at the customer and their experience. I particularly look at governance of a bank and backwards. So quite often, certainly in the EU, banks are very highly regulated, and CEOs and boards can get stuck in fear of risk-taking. So if they can bring the board in as customers and beneficiaries and have that conversation, that changes the fundamental dynamic of trust within a bank. So that's what I would add. Look up as well as out.
Boy, that's a great insight there for sure. And I know, especially at Stanford at D School, on my team, I've had like Russian bankers and a lot of insurance companies. And I was, for a while there, I'm like, why are we having so many banks and insurance companies? And when you talk to them, even though they aren't babies, I understand the empathy in those areas. When you talk to people that are dealing with their insurance company or dealing with their bank, they're struggling. It's not good. Just like healthcare, when you have to, give somebody your information for the gazillionth time, it's the same thing, especially sometimes in some of the insurance. Some of that feels like it's from the 60s, right? And banking, there's some banks that are a little bit better, but it might be in the like 90s or 80s. So I think, once I remember talking with a gentleman, and he was from a chip manufacturer. So the circuit boards and the computer chips, and they sell them for pennies. And he goes, this design thinking is not going to work for me because I'm a semiconductor company, and we're just selling something for a nickel. And I said, I think to Michael's point, you need to cascade down and find out where that is. And I said, man, do you realize I'm working on a project that I need to have either the heat low or the weight has got to be this, and I need it to be the battery to last longer, and I need some of these things. And that's because this is what I need for the user. And then that cascades all the way down to you. You are the magic for me. I need to understand how to meet some of these needs the customer has with stuff that we don't have today. And that's going to come from you. That's not going to come from me. So you imagine that shuttle that with all that stuff that went through it, we needed some really true innovation that had to go down to the sub-supplier level to give us what we need, but they need to connect with that end user need and then cascade back to see what that is. So whether you're going forward or backwards in banking, whatever, I need to go that way. And it was funny because he just didn't realize that, he didn't realize, oh, that's right, my chip goes in something that does something. And by the way, that what it does can be not just make something cheaper, it can make something super cool that we weren't able to do before.
Yeah.
Wireless, whatever.
Right. So it's really hard for us to see everybody, at least on my screen. But Dana, we're going to come to you after Santiago. He's been waiting for quite a while. Santiago, what you got?
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Doug, and all of you. I will ask just one simple question. Sometimes in empathizing and reframing the challenge, I can feel that I have a very powerful insight. How do you feel? How do you recognize that it's a powerful insight? And in case or not, how much time do you still researching for one of them?
Boy, that's a good question, I think. And that's very natural. I know sometimes in our session, we have a cutout. It looks like Superman. And we call it like because a lot of times it's hard to just say, oh, we're still just gathering insights. We're not ready to solution stage yet, but you have this awesome insight / solution that comes up, is to have a place for that. And I hate the word parking lot because I had a friend tell me, a parking lot is something you pave over later. So we have this Superman cutout, and then you put the ideas up on there. So sometimes you can get those insights early on, and to be sure to capture those, whether it's an insight into a solution or something, and put that up, but stay in that moment of gathering more, because usually it's a couple of notches down where some of that insight's going to come from that, to be honest with you, your competitors aren't looking at, your whatever is not looking at, and you need to be patient enough to get down to what those things are. But respect your intuition for sure for some of those insights that you have. And it's amazing every once in a while you go, you know what, let's go back to that first idea we had like 2 weeks ago, and then so be it.
Thank you.
Dana.
Hi. My question has to do with empathy as well, because I have some mixed emotions around empathy. And I think one of the first slides you put up, it talked about removing your biases. So another way I would say that would be, there used to be a saying where you don't know what someone's gone through until you walked in their moccasins. And then illustrating what you said about removing your biases, it might be take your own shoes off before you do it, that sort of thing. So something I've noticed within the design thinking community, I don't see a lot of diversity. As an African-American woman, I notice things like that. That concerns me. When I do hear people say diversity, some people just say, well, does diversity of thought? And that kind of concerns me too, because they kind of just say, oh, well, we have diversity of thought. Even the other day, I was on a webinar, and it was a woman it was an Asian woman who said, well, we don't really look at diversity, female, ethnicity, those are superficial. And I was kind of taken aback. Why would someone say that's superficial? And she said that, well, our people are empathetic. And so we don't, so she saw diversity in terms of thought as being more important, or I think you get the idea. But my thing is, like, I've run into situations where, you know, you'll have people talking about racial justice, right? And I was in a webinar and the guy's asking for people's input and so forth. And it was almost like he discredited my experiences. And he's a white guy. He's running the webinar. I'm the only Black person in the webinar, and he discredited my opinions. And there was a certain arrogance there. And so I kind of think sometimes people think they're being empathetic, but really there's a I won't say, I don't know how to put it in words, but sometimes it can be arrogance and not empathy. And so what people need to understand is there's a difference between empathy and compassion. Like, you can, you know, feel for someone, but to actually know what they've gone through, that's a different level. Does that make sense, what I'm commenting on?
Yeah, that's what a great topic. That needs, to be honest with you, I think that needs a whole session on itself. I think that would be really powerful discussion to have, and have the right diverse experiences together to actually have that come. Because I totally agree with you. I think somebody even talked to me a little bit about that, of, you know, just, you know, having the sympathy. If, you know, you see somebody walking down the sidewalk and they have a backpack and they trip and all their stuff falls out, and, you know, you go, man, I have I'm glad that's not me. And you keep on walking. And then, you know, empathy is, no, that is me. And you go and actually lean in and help them to get stuff back together.
Well, that's
and
compassion. That's compassion. But then so that's what I'm trying to say. There's a difference between empathy and compassion. And sometimes people say, oh, I have empathy, but do you really? Because maybe I'm just gonna, you know, maybe a person who has paralysis, there's no way you're gonna really know exactly how that feels, but I can have compassion on that person.
Yeah, no, there's levels of that for sure. And I like the way, I think I even wrote it down here. You said, you know, it's more the diverse experiences and things that can be the richness that come in, as well as the diversity of thought. And I think you need a little bit of both for sure.
And people, I mean, because I feel like some people just write it off as, oh, we have diversity of thought, but really, do you have representation of diversity too? Like, if you have clients who run the gamut, then why is the team not running the gamut, you know? And there's this saying, don't design something for someone who's not in the room. So that's my
that's really powerful. I know, and I think another thing there with diversity for sure is the diversity of your users or your customers. You can bring them in. I know we did a super cool project where we were working with midwives that were actually going out to different villages. And, you know, the first thing that struck us is, first of all, they're like on the back of like a donkey going through this dirt trail to get to this tent where then all the women were lining up and they were doing this thing, or they were on the back of a scooter and they're going in and the floor is dirt and this whole thing. And we just incorporated them into as best we could to get the diversity of the user involved in the design thinking process. So the diversity of the team working on it, I agree with you for sure, needs to be as best you can put together. But to add to that, if you can get the diversity of your users, because that was super powerful for me, because I'm like a white dude in Wisconsin, you know, and to work on that project and have them involved, and most of the things that just the indigenous materials and colors we use for the product came directly from them, and how they could actually manufacture some of it actually in their village using the materials that they had on hand and doing some really cool things. And then that also brought up their village along with help with the problem we were trying to do at the same time. That was all stuff that came from the diversity of experience and being humble enough to bring them into the development process is how we did it. That's probably not a perfect answer, but
Yeah,
And
that's
also, to be honest with you, we learned a lot, and it was a whole lot of fun. A whole lot of fun.
Well,
Nothing
we're on
for
the
that.
top of the hour now. I would just like to get some final comments from Doug, if possible. Doug, could you share something with us about your concerns or thoughts about the future of design thinking, or perhaps just something that you're working on now, whatever might suit you?
Yeah, I think, great question. And maybe people have some good comments here. You got a great bunch of people that stayed for the backstage. I think I have seen and I think I mentioned a little bit, whether it's the different processes within an organization. It can be Six Sigma, Agile, all these different ones, and they are the flavor of the month. And I just want to be sure that we can do as practitioners as much as we can to be sure that we have the longevity to be sure that we aren't the flavor of the month in design thinking. And also, I think the title design thinking needs to have like a subtitle or something, and that it's, whether it's design doing or something else. And then I think design thinking needs to, it's kind of gotten morphed into a bunch of different things. And sometimes I think it's lost a little bit of the essence of what it needs to be, because there's so much common sense to design thinking of just, why do something until why wonder if you can know, going out and listen to people in the discovery phase so that you're not just blindly doing something. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, let's craft around who do we really want to help, and let's do that. Maybe we have multiple, and then let's work as a team to come up with, it's just all kind of good common sense for creative problem solving. And I just want to hope that that doesn't go away kind of as a fad, is something that I think about a lot, for sure. And that just, that's probably the biggest thing I have. And maybe the last thing I would say with that is that I talk to a lot of people that are within organizations, and they keep thinking about introducing this and thinking about doing a project. And there's just a little bit too much thinking or planning, and that they don't just lean into it. I mean, my first workshop was kind of, I found a team that was struggling. They were like a year behind on their schedule, and they were, so it was like a project that, was their last straw kind of a thing. But at least it was one that we could work on. It actually turned out to be something that was really a cool, actually it ended up being the ventilator that, is such a huge thing now. That project was actually the first design thinking project I did back in 2009, was one of the ventilator products that they make in Madison, which is really cool. So I think that that's something, is just for people to try as best they can to get folks around them to do a session. And if they need a little bit of help, I had a lot of help from some of the P&G, Procter & Gamble, Clay Street folks, and some other folks that helped me to craft my first workshop. Just feel free to, to ask for help and to have people come in and give you assistance to get started. I heard Mukara Meredith. She's a really cool design thinker that came from Platypus, the Mattel think tank, and then she went to Procter & Gamble and did a lot of stuff at the Clay Street. She came in and helped me on my first couple workshops.
Right.
And just learning and mentoring by doing, not by thinking about it. Design
Wonderful.
Doing.
We might get her for one of our sessions, perhaps, and have her on board if she would.
Yeah,
be
she's
willing.
super cool. Yeah.
Okay.
I went to a couple of her trainings too. She had Cultivating Team Genius training out in Colorado. Real powerful stuff. That was a lot of good learning that I put into the workshops that I do.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining us and taking your valuable time with us, and bringing these wonderful stories and insights about design thinking. We really appreciate it, and hope to see you maybe in the audience one day. Who knows?
Yeah. I know.
We'd love to have you come back anytime you'd like. Yeah,
for sure. And that if anybody has any other things or questions they throw to you, Mark, or team, that you think, you can filter them. But if there's things that people want to reach out to me or something, just let me know.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. Made a great Wednesday.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
You.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.